Hey, how you doing? This is Brian Shanley. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy life to consider the things that I'm going to share with you on this Thanksgiving Day, 2025. If you are alive and um, you have your family and your friends, and uh, you have a lot to be thankful for. God has been gracious and merciful in that you're still breathing. In 2025, the number of funerals that I've been to is quite remarkable. People that I've put in the ground that mattered to me a lot. All of them, every last unanimous, have passed from the scene before their time. In other words, I can't recall the last time that I went to a funeral of someone who was in their 80s or 90s and simply died because their time on the earth was over, and the natural causes, old age, etc. It's always been someone who didn't see the age of 50, didn't see the age of 40, you know. And a lot of things are taking place in our time and in our world that are removing people from the planet in an untimely, tragic manner. God is sovereign, and He's the giver and the taker of human life, and He has numbered each and every one of our days. So before He said, "Let there be light," before He created one thing, He already knew He was going to create you one day, and the number of days you were going to walk in this time space universe on this planet in your flesh suit. And there will come a day where you breathe your last, and your soul will return to Elohim who gave it, and um, you'll have to give an account of every moment of your entire life. And every human being stands judicially guilty in the sight of a holy and just God. Um, the vast number of capital crimes, death penalty caliber crimes that you've committed against the throne of heaven itself. Every thought that's ever went through your mind, every word that's ever left your lips, every motive that's ever energized your heart to make you want to do something, every act you've performed in your body, all of these things create this number of scrolls, these certificates against you, full of red marks, or as the song says, crimson stains. You see, and you're going to meet Jesus on the other side of your last breath. You can meet Him as your Messiah who saved you from the fire, or you can meet Him as the judge who's going to throw you into the fire. But you're going to meet Him. He's going to be your Messiah or your judge. Either the Savior that wraps His arm around you, or the judge who says, "Hey, I've got to execute this penalty that you've racked up for yourself." So, choose you this day whom you will serve, and I humbly and respectfully submit that you put your trust in Jesus Christ and Him alone, His words, His work on the cross, His death, His burial, His resurrection. Your life will never be the same again. I may not be everything that I ought to be, but I thank God that I'm not what I used to be. And because I'm still on this planet, there's still hope for me yet. And He's still working out some kind of plan. And anyways, happy Thanksgiving. I hope you're thankful to Him for all that you have in your life. As we head in the direction of the second advent of Messiah, Jesus Christ coming back, not to be whipped on the cross this time, but to be the whipper, if you will. He's going to come not to be the object of sin, but to be the judge of sin. And He's going to rescue His elect from the one world socialist government of the Antichrist. And in order for that to happen, the entire planet has to come under the control of one person. And some kind of totalitarian concept of government that's global in scope. And in 2,000 years of Christian history, we are the first generation where that's possible simply because of the technology. I can remember when I played Nintendo when I was a kid, okay? And then all of a sudden in like 1990, my cousin Robbie, he got this thing called the Genesis. It was by Sega, and the 8-bit video games that I had played, all of a sudden they became 16-bit. And I said, whoa, it just doubled in terms of quality. To me, that was a huge moment, like, wow, things are happening. I remember the first time that I was working an internship at 3M in the summer of 1994, and I had a guy come up to me and say, here's the fax transmittal, here's where it has to go, international phone number 011, send this right away. I sent the fax, I hit the button, blah, blah, blah. It went through, it did its beeps, it took several minutes. You can hear it connect, ting, and it made all these noise. Then eventually you had this sheet come back saying that it was a successful transmission. Well, I realized as that thing came back, wow, I just sent a message to China, and the world just became a smaller place. It was a moment of awe and wonder for me, of shock, because like things were coming together, and I just remember that moment. But so the technology, I also remember hanging out with a pastor once, and we were lost. We were on the Parkway in North Minneapolis trying to drop a lady off. We dropped her off and we're trying to get back to the main drag on Broadway. And he hit the button. We're talking 2002, 2003 on his van. It was OnStar technology or something, which was cutting edge at the time. You are currently on blah, blah, blah street. And he's like, isn't this cool? Part of me was like, this is cool. And part of me is like, someone somewhere knows where you are. And that freaked me out quite a bit, actually. And I remember being hesitant to get a cell phone till my friend Cameron bought me a cell phone. He said, you're my pastor, you're my spiritual advisor. I have to be able to get a hold of you because I'm going through stuff. Take this phone. And all of a sudden, I had this thing following me everywhere. And I know that if you've ever touched a cell phone, you're exposed to all hell. If you've used public Wi-Fi, if you've paid at the pump, if you have one of those flat screen televisions that have the internet, you can look at YouTube on it or whatever. Every word that's spoken in front of one of these pieces of technology can be heard by someone. Have you been talking to someone in your garage about, I don't know, the Cincinnati Bengals or something, and then all of a sudden on your phone you get all these pop-ups, ads, Cincinnati Bengals. How did that happen? Because they're listening to you, okay? So the emerging, for the whole planet to come under the control of one man, they have to be put into a condition propagandistically where they're going to receive that with favor as, this is a great idea for the betterment of all of us. You know what I mean? And there has to be the one world ecumenical religion of the Antichrist, whether that's a religion like a Hindu that takes in everything and absorbs everything, or whether that's some kind of ad campaign, some kind of propaganda, which the entire planet has to be put into a mindset where we need this dictator to come and fix stuff. Only the Christians will see who he is. And I don't know how it's supposed to happen, but the number 666 is going to be critical to determining his identity. So that's the way that we'll know who he is, and we'll be able to spot him. Some of the pre-trib rapture people believe we will be supernaturally removed before this man shows up and we'll never see him. Well, and I'm not going to get into the pre-trib, post-trib disagreement, but I hold a particular position on that and another forum. But anyways, I'm going to talk to you briefly. In England, I got to go back a little bit. A lot of people don't like history, but history is important if you want to find out how things got to be where they are, okay? Everything that we're going through in 2025 is an effect. And there was a cause that took place. Sometimes it was a chain of events down through centuries. This happened, A, B, C, D, E. We arrive at F where we are now. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. But you look backwards to see how things got to be where they are. It helps you unpack and uncoil. And so then you can say, okay, now that I know how things got to be where they are, I have a better understanding of where things are. And now I can start to formulate solutions. It's like a doctor. You got some kind of pain. They do this test, that test, that test. Starts off as a funnel. It gets smaller, smaller, smaller because they're rooting things out until eventually they arrive at what the heck they're dealing with. Then can become the treatment, right? Sometimes you can't do the treatment until you know what you're dealing with. And so sometimes to learn what you're dealing with in 2026 or whatever, you got to look back to 1500 AD or whatever it is, to see the progression of events, how things arrived here. How did we get here? But you go back to England. There was once a guy, his name was Jeremy Bentham, okay? He lived from 1748 to 1832. So you think of Europe in the late 1700s, early 1800s, a hell of a lot of stuff happened during his lifetime. This man was a philosopher. He was a legal scholar. He was a social revolutionary. Inside of his circle, he was highly respected as a thinker, okay? Outside of his circle to the broader world, he was not as respected during his time. And as a philosophy student myself, I can tell you that the history of Western thought looks back upon and remembers him as the founder of utilitarianism, giving you a treatment of philosophical utilitarianism and what it is and how it came to be is outside of the scope of what I want to talk about now. So I'll leave that for another time. But if you read this man's work, I have much of it in my library. Haven't read all of it, but I've read a bunch of it. There are some moments where you're like, wow, this is some brilliant stuff. This is some out-of-the-box thinking. There's other moments where you're like, wow, this is going to end badly. I can't believe you're thinking along these lines. And there's some of it where it's like, this is highly technical. It reads like the instructions of some kind of electronical device, that you're putting together. And what the hell is he talking about? Only God knows. You know what I mean? But the thing that jumps out from the pages is that he has this contradictory philosophy where he's trying to get two things to mix that don't mix. See, on the one hand, he has this belief in individual rights. He even believes in the abolition of slavery, which is good. But in terms of individual rights, he has this very passionate view where he rejects the concept that human rights come from God. Okay, so he's English, but he leans in the direction of the humanistic school of thought within the broader Enlightenment period philosophy. So the Enlightenment period happens, and out of it come multiple schools of thought. English people believed in, for the most part, human rights that are conferred upon them by nature's God or, common sense or whatever. But there was a naturalistic philosophy of a kind. But this Jeremy Bentham, he believed that rights came from other human beings, institutions, governments, as it were. And because of this, he defined himself, he put himself in this category of having much in common with the ideology of the French Revolution. Again, late 1700s, right? So he's more aligned with the liberté, the égalité, and the fraternité of the community organizationalism and activism and, revolutionary movements to overthrow existing governmental, social, economic, and societal conditions and rulership in 1700s and 1800s France and Haiti, respectively. His having much in common with the French Revolution. The French Revolution eventually reaches Germany, where a young man by the name of Marx attends the University of Berlin and gets radicalized with this concept. And Marx teams up with Engels, and they write Das Kapital, Utopian Socialism, and of course, a manifesto for the Communist Party, or as we call it, the Communist Manifesto. Workers of the world unite is the last line in that book. And so these works produce Marxism, and Marxism leads to socialism, and socialism finally arrives at communism. A lot of people who are socialists don't like when I say that socialism is a necessary step en route to communism, and the ultimate goal of socialism is communism. They get mad about that because they try to say we're just socialists, because they know communism is garbage, and they separate themselves from it, at least in their public presentations. But if you know about communism, you know that it resulted in a 20th century that was filled up with mass starvations and re-education camps, gulags, totalitarianism, mass graves, war, and the deaths of over 100 million men, women, and children. You got to think about, as the ball dropped to ring in 1900, the Industrial Revolution was going on. There was a post-slavery new optimism in the United States of America. They believed the year 2000 was going to be a time where all the diseases were removed and we had this great world. And 1900 represented the last century in that direction. They walked in there with this humanism. God himself couldn't sink this ship. Things like that was the zeitgeist. It was the spirit of the age. And optimism was in the air. Of course, by the half of the century is over, you have 2 world wars, one of which resulted in atomic bomb usage. You had diseases, you know what I mean? You had all kinds of stuff go wrong where you're like, okay, maybe human beings are not as evolved as we thought, or as good as we thought, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, 100 million people died as a result of communism, whether you're talking about it in Europe, whether you're talking about it in Asia, whether you're talking about it in South Central Latin America, wherever it's implemented, it's mass graves and it's mass starvation, and that happens. So when we think about this, Jeremy Bentham, again, 1748 to 1832, his thinking about civil rights existing but not coming from God, but being something that human institutions, governments grant to, confer upon you, your family, etc. When someone admits that secular human government has the power to confer or grant a right to you, what is the counter to that? Consequently, they have the power to what? Take it away from you, right? So that's a flawed philosophy that we would not subscribe to, but him holding to it placed him in direct opposition to, in conflict with the John Locke's and the Thomas Paines and the Thomas Jeffersons, who constructed the philosophical basis and the foundational framework for our American Revolution. I don't know if you know this, but not all revolutions are equal. Whether you talk about the Bolshevik Revolution, the French Revolution, etc. Revolutions have to do with, in terms of judging their quality, what is their starting point? What is the basis or reason that they're trying to overthrow the tyrant? Is the tyrant a legitimate tyrant? Okay. And if so, once you overthrow him, what is it your plan to set up, right? And so that being the case, more than one person who came before me, smarter than me, older than me, wiser than me, thought through these things on deeper levels than me, have always arrived at the American Revolution, because of what it was overthrowing and what it was trying to set up, is the only legitimate and real revolution that ever took place in the history of the world. I don't have to say that because other people before me have said it. But godless, non-Christian, anti-Christian Archimedean points, as we call them, starting points, they become the spawning ground, or the thing that gives birth to the creation of policies and practices that, while claiming that they're going to free people, actually end up enslaving those people. And sometimes the enslaved don't even realize what's being done to them until it's too late. They're knee deep and the chains are on and they're screwed before they realize, wow, there's chains on me. they were gradually put there. But other times the enslaved grow to love both their chains and the masters who put them on them. They love this so fiercely and so passionately that, being offered the choice, they'd voluntarily opt to return under the care and the authority of the tyrant. History has shown us this a million times. Fyodor Dostoevsky once predicted, in the end, they will lay their freedom at our feet and say to us, make us your slaves, but feed us. That's not a Christian mentality. That's not a Western mentality. That's not an American mentality. That's not an intelligent mentality. That's not a moral mentality. That's the heart and attitude and mindset of a person who doesn't deserve freedom. They're not in a condition to desire it. They don't have a frame of reference to even begin to imagine what freedom is, because all they've ever known is licking the boots of their tyrant. And not only are they not in a condition to fight for it, but if they inherit it from the outset, they're not in a condition to even think to pay the price to keep it and maintain it. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And if a generation does not have that vigilance, they're not going to pay the price to keep the freedom, you see. I'm reminded of Exodus chapter 16, verses 2 and 3 say, the whole congregation of the Israelis complained about Moses and Aaron in the desert. The Israelis told them, if only we had died by Yahweh's hand in the land of Egypt when we sat by the pots and for cooking meat, when we ate bread until we were filled, because you brought us to this desert to kill this entire congregation with hunger. The concept of missing being under the enslavement of the tyrant because the tyrant made your slavery comfortable by keeping your belly full while you were under his ownership. That's further addressed in verse 8 of Exodus 16. Moses also said, when Yahweh gives you meat to eat in the evening and bread in the morning to satisfy you, Yahweh will hear your complaints directed against him. Who are we? Your complaints aren't against us, but rather against Yahweh. There's something to think about for you. As a kid, my mother told me, if you give somebody the power to feed you, you also give them the power to starve you. In the last month, in October, November 2025 in the United States of America, we had a government shutdown, and that government shutdown caused electronic food stamp deposits to be delayed. In the America that I grew up in as Generation X, 1980s, etc., a government shutdown, especially on the federal level, would not impact daily life at all. But in 2025 America, which I will confess is unrecognizable, the America I grew up in doesn't exist anymore. But in 2025 America, a government shutdown, even on the federal level, was able to cause a crisis of possible starvation. For those of you listening in other countries who don't believe that, I'm not making this up. It was front page, stop the presses, breaking news at this hour, very big deal. Why was there a crisis of possible starvation? Because over 40 million people, 40 million plus, 40 million adults voluntarily, of their own volition, handed over to the government the power to both feed and starve them and their families and their children. And they had made themselves victims of circumstance. I'm reminded of 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 10, where we are warned, if anybody doesn't want to work, he shouldn't eat. There's a freedom in being independent. There's a dignity in paying your own way. And there's a loss of freedom. And there's a loss in dignity in putting yourself in a position in which you have to approach the powers that be, exalting them to the position of God in your life, Jehovah government, my provider, and begging them to grant you and your family the basics of life that it's literally your responsibility to provide for them. That government doesn't love you. They don't love your spouse. They don't love your children. They don't love your grandchildren. They're evil. In the wrong situation, they would liquidate them as undesirable, or whatever you want to call it. But back to this Jeremy Bentham, back to his godless and humanistic concept of human rights, which he thinks comes from a government and not the creator. He developed this fascinating idea. It's called the panopticon. All right? What he was trying to do was take the cutting-edge technological breakthroughs of his time period, innovate them, come up with something new that the world had never seen before, and then use this new thing to standardize industry and to advance productivity. Panopticon is from a Greek root word that means all-seeing. When we hear the word all-seeing, what rushes to our brain? Ancient Egyptian paganism, the all-seeing eye. You think of the Illuminati and Luciferianism, where you see the kids take the picture and they cover their right eye because it's their left eye. That's the all-seeing eye of Osiris or whatever. You have a friend on the street whose nickname is Left Eye, Jimmy Left Eye or whatever. That means they were in some kind of Luciferian type of thing. But we think of that. I mean, look at CBS, the television network. What is their symbol? Woo! Anyways, but you also think when you hear the word all-seeing, in the 1900s, the post-apocalyptic dystopian science fiction stories, whether they were radio broadcasts, TV shows, movies, books, short stories, magazines, whatever, you think of all-seeing, right? And you realize that this man living in the late 1700s, early 1800s, he's proposing in its crudest early seed form the great surveillance state of the worst nightmares of your great-great-grandparents that they always warned you about. In this man's vision, the panopticon was to be an advanced prison. And this prison was supposed to be outfitted with a series of mirrors and telescopes. And using this series of mirrors and telescopes, a group of watchers or a group of supervisors would be empowered with the ability to see every square inch of the place and watch every move of every inmate, every second, every hour, every day, every minute. This panopticon would have looms. Well, what's a loom? How many of you all who are under the sound of my voice have ever owned a pair of underwear or a t-shirt that has the insignia, the brand name Fruit of the Loom? A loom is a hand-operated, power-driven apparatus for weaving fabrics. It contains harnesses, lay, reed, shuttles, threadles, etc. It was used to make clothes, and at that time, centuries ago, it was cutting-edge technology. It was the new thing, you know what I mean? Only the elites had access to it. And alongside it, it would have had other labor industry machines and tools. Bentham wrote that this new technology inside of the prison would rehabilitate offenders and change the penal system, fundamentally transform it into an entire labor force and means of production. The camera didn't exist yet, although the first ones were probably around 1811 or something of that nature. But the camera didn't exist, much less moving pictures, or as they called them for short, movies. But this intricate system of telescopes and mirrors and mirrors and telescopes being watched by monitors was the equivalent of the cameras everywhere type of thing that we know today. The Panopticon, thank God, was never built in real life, but the idea still exists. It's a legend. It's a cautionary tale in philosophy and things like that. When we refer to it as the example, the prototype, the standard when you're thinking of the abuse and the misuse of technology to spy on, to monitor, to control people. We need to also thank God that his American contemporaries, people in our country who were alive at the same time as him, such as Benjamin Franklin, President of the United States, James Madison, when this Bentham guy offered to help our brand new country shape its legal code with his crazy, atheistic philosophy, they rejected his help. And so that's kind of following that example. Nearly every single generation of Americans down through history has had the religion and the morality and the intelligence and the vigilance to both recognize and also reject crazy people, crazy ideas, see them instantaneously, recognize what they are, and avoid them at all cost. Today's generation, however, that ability has nearly vanished from the entire planet. All right. Things that were once well known to be insane and dangerous and even suicidal to the existence of a country are today not only admired, not only celebrated, but they're voted into law. People who openly hold to these concepts get put into office and win elections. And again, if you're watching this from another country, I'm not making this up. In New York City in 2025 special off-year election, they voted in a man who's religiously Islamic and philosophically a socialist, came out and said it as a talking point, as a selling point, and the people voted it in. You talk about the Red-Green Alliance. It reminds me of the Czechoslovakian Democratic Socialist Revolution. And you know how that turned out. 1948. You can look that up. A revolution on the street is where you take over, by force. But a democratic socialist revolution is where you get the people in such a condition through propaganda and such that you don't have to fire one shot. They vote in their own overthrow without firing a single bullet. And next thing you know, they're behind barbed wire and doggies and guns. What happened? You voted like an idiot because the television told you to. That's what happened in Czechoslovakia in 1948. And New York's the biggest city in the United States of America. It's one of the economic capitals of the world. And the people of 2025 voted in their own destruction, and they don't even know it. But anyways, we are through the looking glass. We're Alice in Wonderland, all right? Everything we see in our time period now is backwards. Up is down, black is white, good is evil. And it's all backwards. Everything is just different. The United States of America, in many ways, is breathing her last. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people is in serious danger of perishing from the earth. And as Bantham character has been dead for 200 years, but we have Banthams of our own, in a way, in our own time period, his counterparts, abusers of science, abusers of technology, who desire to control and surveil everybody. The movement to do that is called the Dark Enlightenment. Write that down, the Dark Enlightenment. There are businessmen and politicians and philosophers and entertainers and artists and thinkers and technology experts working together on this. Night and day and night, different shifts. Someone's always working on it. In Silicon Valley, there's a group of elite people who are called techno-utopians. I told you before, Karl Marx wrote a book in the late 1800s called Utopian Socialism, right? Different shell, but same nut. There's nothing new under the sun. A utopia is an imaginary place or state of things in which everything is perfect. To bring about a perfect society on the earth is their goal. Technology is the method by which they want to attempt to achieve this goal. Most of the people involved in it are invisible. You never see them, you never heard of them, wouldn't be able to pick them out of a lineup, all right? Some of the people involved are people you would know, and some of them you respect because you don't know better. J.D. Vance, Elon Musk, these people ring a bell to you. They're all up in this thing. The reason that the elite and the powerful are so attracted to this dark enlightenment is because it's a huge middle finger to the school of thought out of the Enlightenment period that believes in God-given human rights. Human rights conferred on people, not from a government, but from someone higher than government, from the moment of conception up to the point of natural death. Some of the politicians that you look up to and you respect and voted for, thinking they're going to put this country first and do right by this country, are nothing but Trojan horses. I hate to be the one to tell you. I'm sorry that I got to be the one to tell you. I don't want to be the one that has to say it, but it's true. This dark enlightenment, it rejects any and all forms of government which is granted its consent to rule and its power by free and voting citizens. All right, instead it wants to set up a technocratic oligarchy. A technocracy is the government or control of society or industry by an elite of technical experts, and an oligarchy is a small group of people having control of a country, organization, or institution. Thus, a technocratic oligarchy is a system where a small group of wealthy and powerful tech leaders wield immense control over a society, merging economic and political power into one central point. Well, if an oligarchy is a system of government in which power is concentrated into the hands of a small and elite group, and the techno being put in front of it becomes a modifier, it refers to the source of the power that the small elite group of oligarchs wields. Where does that power come from? Being dominant in technology, including control over data, algorithms, and the platforms that have become integral to modern life. You add all this stuff up, and it means that we're heading in the direction of some scary shit. Pardon my English. The Dark Enlightenment is a combination of technocracy, or the view that technology should be the basis of government, with transhumanism. There's a word I bet you've never heard. Write it down. Transhumanism. It is the movement to rearrange or redesign or modify humankind through genetics, DNA, and other technology designed to alter our biological existence. Again, some scary shit. And it sounds too crazy to be real, right? It sounds like science fiction. I wish to God it wasn't real. I wish to God I didn't have to do this particular broadcast. I would love to be talking about pro wrestling or football or whatever else the new movie, what, you know what I mean? Something shallow and non-threatening. You think I like this? Um, the vast majority of Americans that you meet on the street, in the marketplace or whatever, the people in your neighborhood, the people that you meet each day, don't make me sing it. Most of them are unaware of the fact that either technocracy or transhumanism even exist. But the fact that the majority of the people around you don't know it exists doesn't magically make it go away, because these things do exist. And they're huge and they're powerful movements. They're taking place right now. While you're sitting here watching this, someone somewhere is doing something in that direction. And these movements are backed by powerful, frightening people, special interest groups, and both technocracy and transhumanism matter. These are subjects that matter a hell of a lot, because they literally represent one of the factors in the thought process as elites think about all of people from their ivory towers when they look down at you. How they see you is determined by this crap. Plans they make for the future in terms of the direction they want to push society come from this. The WEF, the World Economic Forum, their entire agenda is literally driven by technocratic and transhumanist interests. This means that these two things are bigger than just an American problem. It's international. It's a rubber band that stretches and encompasses the entire planet. Everyone's in this together, so to speak. And I realize, I know there's a lot to take in. This is the kind of crap that's not my normal subject matter, you know what I mean? On this particular platform or any platform. I don't normally talk about this stuff. I know it's not my normal spiel, but as the age of AI dawns upon us, right, looms large on the horizon, like a big black cloud. It's in front of us, and I would be foolish to ignore how relevant technology is, how it has been, how it currently is, and how it's becoming in the future. Both to our exchange of ideas and information, to our basic human freedoms, and to our entire existence, not only as an independent sovereign nation state, but as a people, as human beings on the planet. There are growing dangers with AI, and I feel like I hear about a new one every day. And as a preacher, I'd be doing less than my duty to my Messiah, and I'd be doing less than my duty to you if I did not weigh in on the issues that the bride of Christ faces during the time in which I live. I read some of the writings of Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and especially Zwingli. I'm working through a book right now. The entire book is him writing a letter to the King of France. I don't know what they were fighting about at that time. I'm still looking at it, but the fact that he's weighing in on the issues politically and economically of that time period, I think that's part of the history, heritage, and culture of the preacher. We speak God's position on the things that are happening in our lifetime, and that I finally embraced that again. Every system of belief and thought has an Archimedean point, all right? It's a starting point, whatever that is. And the scriptures say to guard your heart, because from it is the spring from which the issues of life come. I'm paraphrasing. You know what I'm talking about, though. There's always a starting point which gives birth to an entire, what you believe about man and man's relationship to secular human government. It's a journey, all right? It's taking you somewhere. There's a logical end destination that is dropping you off at. So ideas have consequences, and when they're put into practice, societally, culturally, whatever, when they're carried up to their logical conclusion, They can result in freedom and great, explosions in science and technology and economics and art, or they can result in Auschwitz and Buchenwald and the incinerators. Because whatever you believe takes you somewhere, and especially when you put it into practice, right? So ideas have consequences, and where we're at right now is we're just a heartbeat away from 2026. The elites have been building towards this behind the scenes, passing it on from generation to generation for centuries. And what they've been trying to build is nearly complete. You'd be shocked as to how close it is. There are things happening right now I didn't think were going to happen while I was alive. I used to tell my daughter, you're going to go through blah, blah, blah thing, but thank God I'm not going to be alive to see it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of stuff I'm alive to see it. It's like, But if the preachers of 2025 are on their job, if they're at the top of their game, the precious people in the pews can not only remain informed and up to date, but they can even be one step ahead of the forces of evil, and they can navigate and make moves that protect their family. I remember in 2004, we're talking 21, almost 22 years ago, I was teaching a Bible class, and I was a youth pastor, so I'm teaching to teenagers. All of them are probably in their 30s at this point. And I told them, hey, while you're working your job at McDonald's, while you're playing basketball, while you're trying to figure out who you're going to ask out to the next school dance, I want you to think for a second that powerful people that you never see are making major moves against the very existence of your freedom and your future and your options. And it's very important that you stay awake and understand the times. Because I was only a youth pastor, I was chastised by the senior pastor for being negative and for scaring the kids. And I was telling the kids, look, they're building a very big cage, and this cage is designed to keep you inside. And not only to keep you inside, but while you're inside, keep you happy. All right, keep you fed, keep you excited, and keep you working and serving the state until you can't no more. Then they're going to kill you in a socialist hospital or whatever. You know what I mean? So that message in 2004 was ahead of its time, didn't find the audience, but I was doing the scriptures. And now we're 21, nearly 22 years later, and look where the heck we're sitting. And here I am still on the front lines, still risking it all, still putting myself in harm's way in more than one area of life in order to keep you educated as to what's happening now and what's going to happen soon.